My name is Stephan Gruijters. I'm the Chief Digital Officer of the Dutch Geological Survey, part of TNO. And in the next hour, we are going to discuss EGDI and geological data and what that can bring to Europe. And I just put this picture behind me to illustrate the journey that we are about to undertake. So we all know this pyramid that starts with data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And obviously, we all want to be on the top. So we want to make informed decisions with all the big challenges we've been hearing about already in the talks this morning. But to get there, you really have to make sure that the foundation is in order. And today, the EGDI platform is more or less covering access to data and datasets created by lots of different projects over the last 10 15 years. And what we need to do is make that data complete, trusted, and usable. And also, when we are going to build this Geological Service of Europe, it's not building it and then it's done and everybody can go home. No, it needs to be maintained. So in all the things that we do and all the steps that we take, we have to bear in mind that everything we do needs to be sustainable, even when the project ends. That means that the data needs to keep flowing. It must be up to date, right? When we have data sets from 10 years ago, are they still usable? Maybe not. Are they trustable? Maybe, maybe not. And we have to explain to our end users what they're actually looking at, so that they can use it inside their own workflows and inside their own decision making. And that would involve that we need to take that data and put some interpretation on top of that, reaching their domains and their way of thinking and their vocabulary. And that means that we go from facts to interpretations. And again, trust is an important issue here, because who made this interpretation? And what kind of models were used? And what kind of techniques were used to get from this data to this map or to this, let's say, prediction we have at the top of this pyramid? And all these things we need to take care of. And within the community of geological services of Europe, we all have the knowledge to make that happen. So it is a journey, it is a climb, and as this picture shows you, it's not like we're climbing the Mount Everest, so it's doable. And that's an important thing to realize. Because if we would need to climb to Mount Everest in 5 years' time, we wouldn't be successful. But when you look at this picture, this is what we're really looking at. We have already a very good starting point, EGDI, and we have, for the first time ever, all geological surveys inside the project. So we are in a very good starting position to really get to the top and deliver the wisdom that we all are looking for. So in the next hour, we will have a couple of presentations. And after that, 2 more people will join the panel of 5. And I would very much like us to have a very interesting discussion in how GSEU is supposed to look like from your point of view. And what do we need to do to really get there from where we are at this point? So Francesco said we need a live and active audience in the afternoon. We need it already now. So enough for the introduction. I'd like to invite first speaker to the stage, Matt Harrison. He's at BRGM, the Director of Digital Platforms. And he's going to explain a lot of bit more details about EGDI at this point. Matt?
Does this work? Yeah.
It does.
Good morning, everybody. Interesting, actually, the video and what Stephan's just said. Does that feature frighten you or does it excite you? That's kind of where we need to be. I see Kuhn nodding. I don't know whether that's both. Okay. So maybe, one of the things that we've been trying to do in EGDI is to try to kind of make that future less scary for some but also embrace what those future technologies can bring to us. Also, just the subheading for the presentation that I'd given today was around trusted geological information. It could be served with a question mark, trusted geological information, or is that something that we're striving for? It's certainly something that we're striving for within GSEU, but it's kind of an important part of what a geological service could be going forward. So we're not starting with a blank piece of paper in GSEU. Some of the precursors to what we've been doing in EGDI have been mentioned already. So EMODNet, One Geology Europe, there's a very small number of faces in the audience that were involved in One Geology Europe. Way back, it started in 2008. In fact, it was so long ago I had to actually look it up online. So this has been a journey that we've been on for quite a long time. 2016, we agreed amongst a few of the surveys within EGS that we would look at building an infrastructure, really as a way to capture and look after some of the data that had been produced out of these projects. Some of those projects are ended, some of them are ongoing. Then it really took off with the GeoEra project, which started in 2018. That was when we were able to kind of go beyond just doing simple viewers of static data, actually enhancing the search, back engineering some of the metadata that was required, doing some of the really important things around capturing the documentation, which actually lead us into what will be the knowledge infrastructure that we need for GSEU and beyond. So really, you know, that landscape that we've been in is also changing, and so it's not only about giving access to some of the data sets that have been created through EGS members over the last 16 years or so. It's about actually how we're engaging with EU institutions, research infrastructures, international infrastructures. You know, what are we going to do? How are we going to work with the Destination Earth, a digital twin of Europe? It's about actually how we're delivering some of the services that we need through data.europa.eu. And so it's going beyond that kind of rescue mission that we had in EGDI at the very beginning, to looking forward to how we're connecting to some of these big European, big international initiatives, and how we're doing that in a fair way. And you saw that in the video, and you've heard fair mentioned in some of the presentations already. And so there's a portal, and the portal really has evolved, and the portal has really evolved. We were doing some testing of it with some external users, including industry, yesterday, actually because, you know, it's evolved over time, and it's evolved over time with users, but we felt that the year one of GSEU was a really good opportunity to sit down and sort of do a deep dive into how the portal actually behaves. Is it able to answer the question that people come with? And is the information there to support them if they want to do additional work? And does it support sort of policy type decisions? So this is looking at asbestos mines against the depth to aquifers. So actually, does it help us understand the hazards that are out there, or any of the other combinations that we could come up with? So we came up with some use cases. This is actually from the workshop that we had yesterday with users, where we just were asking sort of policy level questions, and were users able to actually answer those using the portal? Were they able to find the information? But it's not only, it's an infrastructure, EGDI. It's not only about how we're presenting the information ourselves. It's about how we're linking with some of the other big European initiatives that are going on at the moment. So we're in the process of onboarding, it's a horrible American term, but we're in the process of actually exposing some of the data within EGDI through the European Open Science Cloud. And one of the interesting things about the European Open Science Cloud particularly is that actually they've segmented users into those kind of the research community, but also providers and kind of onward business usage. And that's testing some of those vocabularies that we've been building. So the vocabularies that we've been building kind of, are from the best endeavors of the EGS members, but is that the way that, let's call them real people, is that the way that the general public, is that the way that businesses really want to actually ask questions of the data that we have? How do we, just like Julie was saying at the beginning, how do we make it clear that our data, the data within the EGDI in this instance, is relevant to people? And so, as well as the OSC, we've got we're exposing our data through the European Plate Observing System. So that's a research infrastructure. It's to the research community. There's borehole data, there's map data, there's model data, and some mine data. And again, that's asking questions about how we are engaging in FAIR. So. It sounds, when you use the acronym FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, it sounds like it's straightforward. But believe me, when you go below that, there's 176 different steps that you could take to be really fair. And therefore, there's an element of interpretation. And so actually, the research community have interpreted FAIR in a slightly different way. And so we have to be flexible enough to be able to make our data available in ways that they wish to use. And again, that is knowledge that we bring back to the EGDI so that we're able to kind of move forward in our understanding of FAIR too. And data spaces have kind of almost come from nowhere in the last few years. In fact, the Open Geospatial Consortium have just signed an agreement with one of the big representing entities around data spaces globally. But we're kind of having some preliminary discussions around the Green Deal the Green Deal data space, how we can. So these are marketplaces for sharing data and information. Again, about trying to make data and information available in ways that people are wanting to use them. We couldn't do that if we hadn't actually built the EGDI, the infrastructure underneath, and it will mean some changes to the way that we're looking at the data and information that we're producing. And one of the things that, one of the ways that we're thinking about how we're going to evolve in the next few years is mounting that pyramid. 2 minutes, thank you. We're mounting that pyramid that Stephan just showed. So actually, how do we go away from, or how do we build upon data and information towards knowledge and wisdom? How do we service the Geological Service for Europe? There are issues that we haven't maybe dealt with at a EGS level around governance, for example, publication procedures, update, maintenance, all of those things. Some of the vocabulary issues that were being addressed in previous presentations. So all of these things are kind of being built into what we're doing in the next few years in the GSEU project. It's an exciting time. It's about actually facilitating the science between surveys, between the organizations that are part of EuroGeos surveys and stakeholders. And so it's really about a conversation with yourselves. What aren't we doing? What could we be doing better? And trying to facilitate that step towards that exciting new world, not a scary new world at all, that exciting new world that is kind of on the horizon, so that we can actually deliver those answers, those responses that are needed for society and make ourselves, or prove to everybody, that we're as relevant as we've always told ourselves that we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, take a seat. I will re-invite you when the panel discussion starts. So next speaker will be Sally Payne-Snell. She's the Secretary General of Eurogeographics. And they're trying to build something pretty similar, but in a different domain. So I'm really anxious to see how they're going to do this job. So please.
Got 4 microphones to choose from. Good morning, everybody. As introduction said, I'm Sally Payne-Snell, and I'm the Chief Executive and Secretary General for Eurogeographics. And basically, I'm a geographer, but I did do geology at university too. So this is really interesting from a personal point of view, but also because I think there are an awful lot of similarities between what we do as an association and what you do as an association. Let's hope I can do this. No, I've got a weakness as well. The green one, there we go. So that's Eurogeographics in a nutshell. We represent over 60 members from the 46 countries across geographical Europe. And we have 3 main pillars of activity: representation, so representing our members; knowledge exchange, which of course is fundamentally important in terms of capacity building and ensuring we don't repeat or duplicate things; and data. And data is really what I want to focus on today, bearing in mind what you're talking about in terms of your knowledge platform. No. So, for very many years, Eurogeographics has created pan-European products. So we have a pan-European product at the 1 to 1 million scale, we have a pan-European product at the 1 to 250,000 scale, and they're both topographic maps. Now, like yours, a 1 to 1 million scale is great for an overview, but actually you need to go into more detail. We have a 1 to 100,000 scale at boundaries, and we're now looking at we have a height data model, and we're going down to cadastral level data. Now, up until a good few years ago, when open data started to become a thing, we used to license all of these products. But as we're moving to the open data world and making these data sets accessible, we had a project under the Connecting Europe facility, which enabled us to open up the products we had, but also develop new products, which also included an imagery layer that covers all of geographical Europe. And as I mentioned, the cadastral layer that allows us to go right down into the building level detail and look at how we're harmonizing that large scale, that high value data across Europe. And just like everybody else, we've also made sure that we are following the Open Data Directive, which is very similar, of course, of the FAIR principles, to make sure everything is findable, it's accessible, it's downloadable, and it's usable, which actually is the most important thing at the end of all of that. You can make all the data accessible, you can make it for people to be able to get hold of, but what you actually need is that people need to be able to use it, and they need to be able to understand the data, and it needs to meet their requirements. Now, by opening up our data, we very excitingly realized that we had a huge success, because when we'd had our data as licensed data, people had to pay for it. Now, we did give it to academia and we did give it to varying organizations, but actually in the main, people had to pay for the data. They had to license the data. By opening up the data, we've seen a huge explosion in the number of people that now use the data. And actually, our figures have gone up to over 900% in terms of how people are using the data. And what happens when people use the data is you start to get lots of feedback about the data that you provide and if it's useful or not. And so that comes back to my point about, is it fit for use? Now, we're really lucky that due to the success of the project, we were able to pull together some really big users who put some case studies together. And due to time, I won't go into all of them, but these are just 3 of the more important ones. and particularly the External Action Service, who have used it very much to help with all the efforts in terms of migration routes, but also in terms of getting resources in and out of Ukraine, in fact. And the European Environment Agency, which again may be very interesting for you, are using it in their ground monitoring system. So another really big usage because of the pan-European data. Now, because we were successful and because we were able to show value to the Commission on what we'd done, we come around to this point of sustainability and how do you keep things going at the end of a project? So you can do really, really well, but what do you do when it finishes, when the money finishes? Now, from our point of view at this stage, we were able to go back to the Commission, we were able to share what we'd done and the successes we'd done, and we applied for funding to move from Open Maps for Europe to really an innovative title, Open Maps for Europe 2. And what Open Maps for Europe 2 does is two things. Firstly, what it enables us to do is to sustain what we already have, which is really important, because one of the things we also need to think about whenever we're creating these things, once you have the data out there and people rely on it, and it's trusted because it's from authoritative sources, what happens if you take it away from them? Suddenly your ability to be trusted or to be relied on is removed, and that's not good for our members. So actually, it's really important that we can sustain what we've done, we can enhance it based on feedback, and then we can extend what we're doing. So that was a really, really positive thing that we were able to get that continued funding. And one of the things we were able to do, first of all, we started in Open Maps for Europe with one high-value data set that's under the Open Data Directive, which was the cadastral map. And that was just a pilot initially. And through this project, we'll be working at that very large-scale data, so the building level data, the cadastral parcel data level. And we'll be extending that initially to 9 more countries to be able to get much more coverage. But the second thing, probably that's even more important from our point of view, is Open Maps for Europe is allowing us to look at the production process to enable us to create large-scale pan-European data. And by that, we're talking about a 1 to 10,000 scale. And that's most of our members, our national mapping agencies, have even larger scale data than that. But that's a fairly consistent level across geographical Europe. And what we did, again, and it comes to the user, is looking at the user. What did they want? What was important to them? What could we deliver to them that helped them to address their needs and their requirements at a European level that might then also help to address some of these massive global issues, which is fundamentally what we're all trying to do in terms of the fires or the floods or ensuring we've got clean drinking water. So Open Maps for Europe 2 takes what we've done, builds on the success of what we've done at the small scale, and takes it to the large scale so we can create this large scale pan-European data. And for that, we have needed investment not only from the Commission, but also significantly from our members. And that's really what I want to finish on. Just in terms of summary, you know, we've got the platform. It's really successful. It's being used. People trust us. People are talking to us. The use of data is expanded. But what do we do in terms of sustainability? Because like all European funded projects, at the end, the funding stops. And creating a large-scale database is a very, very different situation than a small scale. And so currently within the project, sustainability is a big work package. Because if we're unable to get the infrastructure funding that we require, which runs into millions per year for large-scale data, we will have to look at alternative options with our stakeholders. And that may be that we open up the process and we open up all the tools that we have created within this project and make it available to our stakeholders or make it available to our partners. And a membership association, we just facilitate access to our members' data. Is that one way of making it sustainable? And I think in the discussions that we'll probably have afterwards, it's one of the most important things. You need to meet user requirements. They really want the data, but how do you then persuade them to help you make that data sustainable so it continues to be valuable and it continues to help us address the global issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I'm looking forward to the discussion already because there's some really interesting points in this presentation. And it illustrates the same problems that we're facing within GSEU, or the same challenges, let's say. New on the stage, Paul Allen. He's from Quorum Software, and he's the Vice President in consulting. And they're delivering services, so that's good, in the upstream and midstream energy world. And he's going to enlighten us on the strategic evaluation of carbon storage potential.
Thank you.
There you go, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello.
Any mic. There we go. Good morning. Once again, I'm Paul Allen with Quorum Software. A little bit different perspective in this presentation from some of the things you've seen this morning, I think. This is based on some ideas and concepts that we've developed over the past 20 years in dealing with limited data or no data and still making decisions. And our client base with the Shells and ExxonMobils, BPs, and small companies as well, real estate companies, pharmaceutical. How do you make decisions with limited data? And that's what we'll be covering here. And this ties together with the data sets that I was looking at from the storage potential, carbon storage potential. And I've got the same issue apparently. So the problem statement, I mean, this doesn't need to be drilled into. It's what every client or every company that we're dealing with is facing, an aspiration to path at zero while the energy use needs are going up at the same time. So balancing competing demands, and that becomes a key element with all of this. So how to trade these things off. And our clients are often faced with this and looking at an existing organization, how to extract the value of that optimally while you're transitioning. So the Shells of the world looking at trying to go to a lower carbon footprint without leaving a lot of value on the table. And so that begs the question, well, are we transitioning too quickly? Are we transitioning too slowly? Based on our asset base. And so there's a rationalization that needs to take place with that. And that allows us to ask a number of different questions. Which investments deliver the biggest punch in carbon reduction? Which investments are aligned with legacy assets? The uncertainties are a key element of all of this. How to factor in the uncertainties in the markets and potential. And then how to look at very disparate investment options on the same playing field. So you're a large international company and you're trying to make two investment decisions that are very different. How to put that on a level playing field. And that's what we've developed here with a process using portfolio analysis that allows us to look at different strategies and basically look at a business model and transition that business model into a new business model. And that's what is shown on the right. We can go into more detail here, but it's looking at two different business models that are vastly different, and the impacts of reducing your carbon footprint and the cost and the investment profiles that you would need to make that happen. And so the overall process is fairly straightforward. We start with what is your strategy, and that's what's shown here. There's a number of slides. It's hard to show the individual pieces, but what we're looking at are things like capital. These are KPIs that a company might have. And an objective for carbon reduction. As you can see, both are not being met in this case. So we start with that, then we look at an inventory of options, and this would be your investment options, your legacy assets, new investment options, and this may include things that you don't even understand or know. For example, if you have no exposure to CCS, we can still throw that in the portfolio. And the idea with this is this allows us to see what data is actually relevant to a decision. And then we can start to drill in on improving that data. So we start with the data, and I've shown some data sources there. We could go back to the Department of Energy. I've built models that sampled from large sets from the Department of Energy and other groups, EGDI, being able to pull in volumes, for example, or storage potential, for example, without even economics, without cash flows, without any of that, but we're trying to put a value on it. Well, the value comes from the rest of the portfolio. So that's the trick here, is optimize a portfolio, understand the value contribution of whatever is being delivered by that CCS, storage potential, and that allows us to put a value on that. We can then start to look at where we might go for opportunities like that. And this just goes into more detail. We can then specify the optionality or the scalability of those options. And that might be what's being shown here is wind farms and different wind potential locations, and being able to dial that in and refine the data. How many projects per year, what investment profiles per year. And then we optimize. We've got a linear optimizer routine built into this that allows us to maximize any objective against other constraints. So in this case, maximize the value while maintaining a capital profile and delivering a carbon footprint reduction under a given level. And it just allows us to very quickly come up with alternative scenarios. And then using that, we can say with and without the CCS opportunities, what is the delta in the portfolio value? And this is something that has hit a lot of our clients strongly. It's a big point in that the value of a deal is vastly different than the value of a deal in a portfolio. And so the portfolio value of a deal can be 3 times the deal value in the right set of circumstances. If you're trying to reduce carbon footprint, a cost, the CCS project I had in this example model had a negative value. It was $3 million loss. But in a portfolio context, it has a $1.5 billion plus, because it allows you to do the other investments and then reduce the carbon from those other investments. So it's the trade-offs. And then we can drill down. Our application allows us to drill down by multiple attributes. We typically do that and break the problem apart in terms of geologic location or geographic location, sorry, or different risk profiles or other elements. And then the other element that we typically will bring along stochastic data. We represent all of the options within a portfolio stochastically, and that allows us to look at a stochastic aggregation. So an aggregate uncertainty from the entire portfolio. And what this allows us to do is look at a strategy and say, what's the chance of that strategy actually occurring? And so rather than just rolling up a strategy and handing that over to the board of Shell, we can actually say this is a strategy that has an 80% or 90% confidence of being realized. And that's what's shown by the dots and the blue lines. Those are confidence bands around the data that we have within the system. So what do we get from all of this? We can get the value of an asset, any asset within the portfolio as a portfolio value. We can look at the individual deal value as well, but the portfolio value of the asset. We can understand the trade-offs between different strategies, so very different paths towards lower carbon generation. We can look at the value accretion or dilution given certain storage types, and then we can look at the uncertainties to see where the real risk and exposure is overall. The whole point with this is not to deliver an answer or the best portfolio, it's really to gain perspectives on the information that you have. And that's it. Well, thank you very much.
You didn't even need my 2 minutes warning sign, so that's good. Thank you. Please, I'd like to invite the previous 2 speakers also to join us for the panel discussion. And they will be joined by Gerardo Herrera. Oh, you saw him in the back. Yes, he's the seconded national expert at DG GROW. Welcome. And Helen Glaves. She's in the back. Yeah, there she is. Hello. President for EGU. Technicalities.
Oh, thank you.
So interesting from the last presentation that we are always talking about added value products and then wonder what this added value is. And you just pointed out that value is simply money in the end, right?
A better world, potentially.
Or a better world. So
Not me. I'm sorry. Didn't you?
this is Jasna. The best friend I know Jasna for 20 years almost.
Yes.
So how I can forget you? So I apologize. Next beer is on me.
Yeah.
Jasna works at the Geological Survey of Slovenia. So the first question to the panel. In the introduction, we painted this picture of what a Geological Survey of Europe could be. And we are aiming at really delivering added value products that can be used in workflows and decision making. And also keeping that sustainable after the project ends. So that means the software and the hardware, the data and the people taking care of it. So the main question is, what would be key to make this reality?
I can start.
Yeah.
So I think I've actually been involved in a number of these projects over the years and coordinated a few. In fact, Matt made me feel really old because he showed a logo of a project that I led in 2009. So that made me feel very old. But one of the challenges we did face is how do you keep these things alive and how do you make sure that they are actually supported beyond the end of the project? And I think one of the things we learned is that, you know, trying to seek rolling funding through funding from funding agencies is not necessarily the right model. And I think one of the key things is having that vision for sustainability right from the outset, but also building your user base, making sure that you develop a critical mass of users that make that infrastructure or that data system or indeed the team of people that are supporting that effort actually essential for the researchers, but also for the commercial partners. And I think if you have developed a strong user base, but also making sure that whatever you're doing is also well integrated with other initiatives. Matt painted a great picture of the landscape. There were a couple of things that I would have thrown in, including the group on Earth observation, which I'm also involved with. But I think it's about building that critical mass and making sure that what you're delivering to users is what they need, because then it becomes essential for ongoing research efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree completely. I think it's about the users, but all this is so the sustainability piece. In terms of what we're looking at, and I was trying to say, it doesn't always mean that you need to do it. And I think that's something that we've learnt within Eurogeographics. Like, we invest and we pay and we continue to do all the production and we continue to do everything. But it becomes more and more difficult because as you create the larger scale data, it's just more expensive. The investment is huge. And we as a small membership association can't possibly support that. And our members are doing that at a national level and can't support that. So I think instead of always thinking that we have to do it, it's how you're working in partnership with people. One is building the critical mass of users, and for us, particularly within the Commission and certain areas within the Commission, to enable you to feel that you can work with them or hand over what you're doing so they can do that. You've proved the concept, you've shown what's possible, you're showing the user base, you've proved you need it, and if they really, really need it, then they can take it and we'll support them to do it. And I think it's sometimes I've worked at Eurogeographics for 14 years, and I've worked in geography, etc., for my whole career. So you're very passionate about what you're doing. You're very passionate about these products that you create or data sets that you create. But actually, it's about them being used. And if that means you can work in partnership with people and that you can facilitate their access to what you're doing instead of always having to take the investment yourself as a membership association where you don't have those funds, then you can sometimes see beyond just the end of that project. I mean, the other area, of course, is looking for that infrastructure funding. and doing your lobbying and representation right at the beginning of projects to get into the infrastructure funding. So you need to get into the budget, basically. And that has a very long rolling period of time. It's like a 5 years, the commission funding, but you have to get in before then. So if you're looking at that, this is where the projects are difficult, because if you have 3-year projects or 2-year projects, you're never quite getting into that funding cycle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Okay, so I'm going to provide the user perspective, because I am as DG Grow, and we are working with raw materials, and we bring this user perspective. I think, well, the Commission, you have said before, has been funding a lot of projects to collect information, to develop information, but as you say, these are 2, 3-year, 4-year projects that end, and EGDI is a beautiful interface that is very well collecting these results of their projects to have them somewhere. But we need to go to the other level, that is the usability of the data, the creating the knowledge, going from the data infrastructure to the knowledge. And in this case, we have been doing also a little bit of our homework, in the sense that we are saying, okay, it's not only a matter of providing projects funded by Horizon Europe, H2020, FP7, it's about making a law to frame this. And this is the Critical Raw Material Act, where the geological information has a major role. As a law, we are asking national authorities, member states, to deliver national exploration programs, because we want to keep on harvesting data, geological data. So we are making this to make sure that every member state is going to work as much as they can to deliver, to update, to improve these geological maps that we need for the policy making, because we have seen the limitations of funding these programs. So this is one. Because why I say this? Because there are very important articles that are where we need you, Geological Service, to make a successful Critical Raw Material Act implementation. We need you to do the national exploration programs. We need you to collect this information on critical raw materials, on strategic raw materials. We're speaking about greenfields, but we are also speaking about brownfields. It's very important, this information from you. So we need to have this information, and we have seen in EGDI, and thanks to this GSEU project, that there are very good developments. Where is Guillaume? I don't see him, Guillaume, there. Okay, so we have seen the map before, no? You have done the critical raw materials map 23 with the new list of critical raw materials, so this is great, and we are very thankful for this effort. And what we would like to see, of course, is this map to be completed, because we see some gaps. Some countries, this data is missing, and it's not useful for us as policymakers, because we need completeness. Because when I have a request from the president, I need to provide information for the 27 countries. This is my need, my daily need, provide information of the 27 countries. But I think that you are perfectly on track. We are fully supporting this initiative, and we want to bring you to the law status, no? So we make sure by law that all the countries will deliver the necessary information to provide raw material information. Why? Because we need to develop these strategic and raw material projects in Europe. So this would be a little bit my first reflection.
Thank you. Jasna.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephan. For me, the key thing is trusted quality data, organized or following fair principles, and we need to, of course, we need to fulfill user requirements. We need to that our data is usable. But I would really emphasize that the responsibility, we have a huge responsibility, geological surveys of Europe, more like this, okay. Geological Surveys of Europe, we have a huge responsibility for ensuring that the data is high quality, that that can be trusted, that it's updated on a regular basis. And that is on us. On us as experts to produce quality data, and also on organizations to have the, let's say, procedures in place that is possible. And if we will have that, then in my view, also sustainability and governance and all that will be easier. So a lot of work ahead of us.
Thank you, Justin.
The value proposition here is a single source of truth, or the source of truth. The source of truth is key in having all the stakeholders understand that, and that's the challenge, because industry is going to come to this and say, well, our data it's proprietary, we've got a competitive advantage over others, so I don't want to share this, and I don't want to be told I have to share this. Mm-hmm. And then you've got governments that it's in their interest to force that sharing to take place. So I'm with you that it's almost a mandate that you have to have some type of regulatory frame or government guidance to make that happen. I think of the SEC, the reporting at the SEC, and just right now trying to get reporting of carbon emissions and the battles that are taking place with that, competing interest again. And I think it's going to take some bigger action there. I'm seeing that I'm involved with the United Nations, the classification as well, and seeing the push to try to make that happen. And it's the same set of issues.
Yeah.
Can I just comment on the legislation?
Yeah.
Just to comment quickly on the legislative part. Again, from a geography point of view, and I know some of you worked with this as well, the INSPIRE directive is out there. So that for national mapping agencies, there's the INSPIRE directive, which required them to make their data accessible to a set of standards. But I would just err slight caution, because although there's a legislative framework in place, and now Open Data Directive, high value data, etc., which makes this data available, it doesn't necessarily make it usable. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is all the member states create their portals and they follow the directive in the way that they want to follow the directive. And so what you end up happening is, still from our point of view, they're making their data available, they're making it accessible, they're making it downloadable, but Germany's data doesn't match France's data, which doesn't match Belgium's data. So you don't get harmonisation. So legislation provides one part. It provides the push to make the data open and available, but it doesn't create the harmonised mapping. And that's where some of these projects and organisations such as Eurogeosurveys and Eurogeographics have a really huge part to play in that integration. And also, you could fund member states, but nobody is funding the people that's doing the integration. And to address these challenges and to enable us to be able to look at things across borders, you have to have the usability of the data across borders. And there has to be an element of that funding, not just for the member states who absolutely need that to create the high value, authoritative data within their country, but you then need to look at how you're going to make that available at the European level. And at the moment, it falls to membership associations, to trade associations who are not funded. So there's absolute value in the law and the legislation, but you also have to look at, do you need something above that at the European level that enables all these things still to be stitched together? Because data might be free, data might have no value, but the integration piece has significant value. You were talking about the 157 steps. I don't even know how many steps our guys go through to create that harmonized edge-match data. Even with AI, even with advanced technologies, there's still a lot of human intervention, and that has cost. So I think in order to make it effective, in a regional and then pan-European global level, you have to look at the stage above that.
Yeah, thank you. And in fact, we are funding all these organizations on a national level because we understand that there needs to be money. But if we bring it together on a European level, that's another discussion sometimes. I can imagine that you have millions of questions. So we have room for a couple of those. So there's the first one. There's a mic, yeah?
I have a nice, easy question for Matt Harrison. Matt, I'm a director of a geological survey, right? You know me, Kuhn. I head the Geological Survey. What percentage of my budget and what percentage of my staff should I be spending on information management? It's a softball question.
All of it, Kuhn. This is you always ask a very similar question, and it's a very, very important one. Actually, probably the answer comes down to the state of the data that you're providing, because it is about leveling upwards. It's about actually trying to come together to deliver what is needed for the Commission, but also what is needed for society. So if your data is in a poor state, then you are going to have to spend more. There are best practices that we can share. There has been an awful lot of legwork and spade work done in building some of the standards and vocabularies that you can use. So we've kind of reduced those costs for you. But I'm afraid that there is a cost, and at some point, you know, the sustainability point is very well made. At some point, those costs have to be met. There is an advantage, I would argue, in you spending some of your national money on doing that. But there is always this question that Sally referred to, and it's been a question that many of us have had discussions late into the night, perhaps over a glass of wine or beer, about where that gap money comes from. Because in a way, the greatest value, the value add, is in the gaps. You know, filling in the gaps. It's about the building on the gaps. It's about actually how you harmonize things across borders, how you harmonize things so that you can reuse that data. You know, you collect it for one purpose, but reuse it for other purposes. And I'm still not completely sure that we've actually really answered the sustainability question here. I think that absolutely, all of the things that have been talked about, all of the things that have been described are key elements to that. But whether even with if the sum total of everything that the panel here actually did say is responded to, I'm still not completely sure that we have the sustainability thing sorted out. So to an extent, you are going to have to potentially go outside your comfort zone. So do the things that are needed for your own data, but also do some of the gap filling too. Sorry.
Anyone else? Yes, Martin.
Yeah, Martin Pearson. I work for the Dutch government. Yeah, I have a special question for you, because it's nice to have the system and say this system and all the data is correct and works and is available. But how do you make sure that people are aware? Because now they're unaware and they're also unskilled. So most of the young professionals which are working in the Ministry of Interior Affairs, doing the spatial planning, work in the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Works, Ministry of Economic Affairs, they don't know that there is a GSEU. They don't know that there is data they can use for the policy making. And they also not trained to use it. And how are you going to ensure that this young new generation of policymakers are going to use it to fulfill the Soil Directive, to fulfill the Critical Raw Material Act, to make sure that we have the Water Directive, that there is enough drinking water? How are you going to ensure as this community from professionals that they are aware and they are skilled to do it?
Who wants to react?
No, I would say a case study approach is the way to do that. You show an example of where this has been applied and made real effective decision-making possible, and use that as a learning tool for the future. And that builds on it. It builds momentum for the process. It builds momentum. It flushes out bad information or other things as well while you do that. So I would say a case study approach would be mine.
Helen?
Yeah, and I completely agree with that, but I think I'd go the next step as well. I think you need to make sure you're engaging with that next generation of researchers, bringing them on board, making sure they're involved in these projects. You know, I mean, a perfect example is GSEU. You know, are you actually bringing in, the PhD students, the master's students, and getting them involved and developing the use cases that you've just mentioned? Because if they're using these tools as part of their studies, they become aware of what's available, how they can connect with the community. That's how you make sure they're making use of these resources. So there's a whole piece here about capacity building and engagement, not just with the people we know here, sitting here, and our regular networks, but also broadening that network to the next generation of researchers.
Yeah, so it's about usability, but it's also about building a user community, and it's about being known, right?
And I would just also add as well, it depends on how you're showing and visualizing the data. So the Open Maps for Europe portal has all the important data in it, but you don't need to be an expert to use it, because you can use it on the portal. My mum and dad can use it. So they don't need to be an expert to be able to use that data. They are used to, and whether we like it or not, Google Maps and OpenStreetMaps means that people are much, much more aware of geospatial data. They use it all the time. I used it to find here. I use it to navigate round, to find a pub, to find a restaurant. People actually use geospatial data significantly more than they did. So you're not having to do a persuasion from a mapping point of view. I understand geology is slightly different because it's underneath and it's harder. But from a mapping point of view, although we always worry about this competition, actually it's not really competition. They do something quite different from what we do, but what it's brilliantly done for us is raise awareness. Because people know what a map is. And you have to build into these portals and into these systems ability for non-clever users to be able to use the data and to be able to value the data. Because no policymaker is sitting there going, oh, I need to work out how to move this object here, and is this identifier here? They're not doing that. They just want the data in a simple, usable way. And therefore, whatever you create, when I talked about usability, it is usability of what you're creating and the platform that you're putting round to enable that person doesn't need to have lots of skills, etc., to be able to gain value from that data.
Thank you.
Now, for me, is simply engaging with other communities. And that what Helen said, it's really important. That is how you get visibility. That is how people know that we have data. It's not just about finding the data, but actually usability to engage other communities. And that should be our goal.
Quick intervention. I will tell you a secret. I come from the Geological Survey of Spain. I'm in the Commission. I'm surrounded by lawyers and economists, And there are a few geologists. One is there, Robert, and some others. But at the end, I'm requested to look for the maps because it's too difficult, as you say. So one idea, one angle is to simplify as much as possible the maps for policymakers that are lawyers or economists. They don't know about geology. So I was interacting a lot with Guillaume, telling, please, guys, do me a map of the critical raw materials and the strategic raw materials, So it's simple, because you have other very useful information on raw materials for science or for experts in the raw materials domain, but not for policymakers.
Yeah.
So we need really simple maps with a simple legend where you see lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, and everybody understands, and it's a click, and complete with the 27 countries. With information of the 27 countries, you have this beautiful display of the importance of the deposit. It needs to be also completed because in some countries you have information, so that needs to be worked. And also another layer that is very useful for a policymaker, mines, points with the mines in Europe. So at the end, the policymaker, for the simple daily life, needs very simple maps. And this is what I want to convey. There is a lot of training that needs to be done. You can send, if you are from the Ministry of Economy, you send seconded national experts to the geological surveys, and they learn, and this is great. But at the end, if you can make simple maps, but really simple is what we need. And the others are also very useful, but for industry, to develop projects, for scientists. So it's not that it's not useful. EGDI is super useful, but we need to distinguish the audience of each map. And there has to be a kind of map set for economists and lawyers, okay? This is my tip.
Yeah, thank you. So it's like Chris showed us this morning, right, on his picture. We need to create maps, and we need to really think hard about what we are going to put on that map. And that will be different for different user perspectives. And the most simple map very often is the most difficult to make. But we know how to do that, right? So that's not a problem. But really engaging and understanding what we need to put on the map and where the added value is there, I think that's the valuable discussion that we need to have to really understand each other and really create information that you can use for your informed decision making. I think we have room for one final question before we break for lunch.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm Gilles Ricollet. You can guess from my accent where I'm coming from, so I won't tell that. I'm representing here the European Marine Board. And as I see you have the cost and see, I would like to know how you deal with the marine data. What is your connection with the people providing the marine data? And I come here also to remember that Maria Damanakis, for the people from Europe, if you remember her, at the beginning of Horizon 2020, she said, opening, Europe will have a map of all the seabed in 2020. So I was sitting in the assembly as I'm a marine geologist. So I pretend to be a marine geologist. And I was sitting on my chair and I say, my God, is she knowing what she's talking about? So we don't have any maps. And as you were talking about maps, so I wonder how you, with your cost and see, is that only related to cost, or how you're going to have a relationship, to have a vision, a wider vision, and how you think you will succeed in having one day a map of the sea, not like Seabed 2030, because the people of Seabed 2030, I don't know if you know this international group for the UN, UNESCO Seabed 2030, where they claim they will map all the ocean for 2030, and they say they have 20% of the coverage already realized. And every time I'm the bad guy, I raise my hand and I say, what is the resolution of your map? 1 kilometer. 1 kilometer. Can you imagine to the geologist if you say you're going to have a resolution of 1 kilometer? So we are far from that, and it's more and more difficult because the water is not like when you are Earth. You cannot go diving with your hammer as a geologist. After 100 meters, it's getting more and more difficult. So we need to do something, and I don't know how you plan to work with the sea. Here's my question, so thank you. I've been a little bit long, sorry about that.
Yeah, so I think the answer is EMODNet. Ran our marine program in Ireland for a while. So we're now on about the 4th phase of EMODNet, and I think it's been brilliant with DG Mare. With Maria Damanaki held up the offshore geology map as an example to the other commissioners of what could be achieved, and we're very lucky. Both the geology module and the bathymetry module, we run the bathymetric survey in Ireland as well. We'll have all our survey mapped by all our areas mapped by 2026, 100% high resolution multi-beam for free online. But
yeah, well, can I make a small
yeah.
gesture, because I'm sorry, Koen, and Gees, we are really running a bit out of time, and we are going to have a session about the topic.
Okay.
My mic is off. Now it's better. Yeah. So I just don't want to have a very long discussion of visitors, because we are going to show this later on in the day.
Very good. So thank you for your participation in the discussion. Thank you being on the panel. So a big hand for the panelists and the presenters. And I think there's one small bit of program before we break for lunch, or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, we had to keep you here for 5-10 minutes. But before, we have a small present for our two external speakers, Paul and Sally, because one of our motto GSEU is like we make the invisible visible, so we bring the subsurface to the light. So that's why our communication manager have this beautiful idea to the present. So we have 2 cores for the North Sea. So we actually bring something for the subsurface to the light for Sally and Paul. Thanks again for joining us here. And thanks again to all panelists. I think you can walk back to your seat. Thanks again.
Yeah, I have the honorable task of keeping you from lunch as the later speaker. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'll also keep it short. Francesco asked me to share a little bit of the North Pole with you. If you go to the next slide, please. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I'm fascinated why people ignore climate change, and that was the reason why I started this project. Exactly 7 years ago, I've been on Spitsbergen, on Svalbard, to work on this question and to do field work. So I'm intrigued why human beings don't act as rational entities, but there are many more factors at play. So with something like climate change, we need to realize that it's not only hard data or facts or figures which are pushing us to take action, but it's also our reality is being shaped in social facts, so stories and realities. Facts and figures and the way we talk about it is a social fact. So that's why I started this storytelling project together with an artist, visual artist. And I've been doing fieldwork there, doing a lot of interviews, talking to people. And for today, during lunch in the Da Vinci room, there's an exhibit of the work of my friend. And yeah, I'm happy to talk with you there and share some of my experiences. And for now, I wish you a great day and a great lunch.